we typically use the awareness to action framework, which says the type 3 is striving to feel outstanding, focused on success, achieving. How do you describe the 3 though in your own workshops and with your own team?
I describe the 3, I mean, similar, but I talk a lot about kind of the core desire to always look successful, but I always also talk about how being a little bit on like that vein of deceit for a type 3, like how that shows up in the layers of wanting to be successful. So I always try to talk about both of those things because threes usually can relate to that if they have any level of self-awareness.
Okay. Okay. And that is helpful. Um, and well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we are
Mm-hmm.
also we have our type 9 today, which again,
Mm-hmm.
according to the awareness action, they say it's striving to feel at peace and peaceful. And this includes having a feeling of internal peace as well as my outside environment being peaceful. But curious, like how do you usually introduce the type 9?
I try to introduce the type 9 as like this pillar of stability in terms of calmness. And I always remember to say, like, I know stability sometimes seems like a really boring superpower, but I feel like nines, that is such an important thing they bring to a relationship, to a team, to a room, is just that like stability, calmness, really, really being okay with like taking a little bit of a step back to look at things. Whereas a 3, I'm more like in there. Like it's harder for me to take a
Yeah.
step back
Yeah,
to
because
look
you're
at
taking a
things.
step forward, you usually. Yeah.
Totally. Oh yeah.
Um, one of the things too that similar to that when we talk about the strengths of a 9 is their that level-headedness. And so that will probably come into play here in this conversation as
Yeah.
well. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious. I know that we've had you on the show. This is I can't remember if it's your second or your third time back. But for those people who haven't yet heard you, what about the type 3 really resonates with you? Or what was the thing that made you think, okay, yep, this has to be my type?
Yeah, so I actually initially thought I was a type 1 when I first learned the Enneagram because it felt very much like, okay, yeah, I could see myself really like looking at what's wrong that needs to be better. I could see myself really wanting to not necessarily like perfect things, but in terms of like being goal oriented and along that line, I related to that until looking at the type 3 and learning more about the type 3. The two things for me, because I know threes and ones will mistype a lot, is what I've learned and
Uh-huh.
what I've experienced with clients. um, First of all, when the underlying kind of emotional struggle for each of those is very, very different, right? So for ones there's like the anger kind of under the surface, and for threes it's shame. So once I understood that, I was like, oh yeah,
Oh,
like I have the shame thing much more than the anger thing. So that was one thing that really, really helped me. And then the identity, like searching identity, trying to connect with identity in that more like feeling center, heart centered space. I really connected with that as well.
okay.
And then I think the last thing that really sealed the deal for me is when I had the understanding that even though type threes are very heart centered and like dominant in feelings, threes are actually like disconnected from feelings because even as a therapist, I know this, like, and I understand this from clients, like feelings are not efficient for me. So it's like, I'm not going to lead with those. I'm going to lead with like, what do I need to do next? But I'm still heart dominant. So once I understood that piece and
Mm.
that layer of the Enneagram, I was like, oh, this explains literally my whole career path. Like my life was then like is that one of those things that we talk about, like, get out of my head. Like, that is exactly what I understand and how I have like experienced myself. So,
Okay, and I'm so glad you brought up the 1 and 3 similarities because that is one of the most common like struggles. Am I this or that? So hopefully some of those nuances might help anybody listening to this
mm-hmm.
also struggling. Am I a 3 or a 1? Occasionally I will, and I'm curious if you run into this. I will have people struggle between a 3 and a 9. And what I have seen, and again, this kind of goes back to the model we use, but I want to hear your take on it, is
Mm-hmm.
with awareness to action, they have the 3 instinctual biases. And
Mm-hmm.
typically that, am I this or that? Am I a 3 or a 9? Happens for like a transmitting or what conventional Enneagram might call like the one-on-one or the sexual 9,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to be a little bit more out there, like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more image conscious with the transmitting energy, a little bit more ambitious. And so it can feel like, wait a minute, am I a 3 or am I a 9? Do you run into that ever? People struggle between those two?
I have run into that 3 and 9, and usually, like, yes, the subtypes or the instinctual drives helps with that. I think the other thing that I've seen help is just going back to, like, okay, if you're a 3, right? Like, let's say, like you're a 3, you're identifying as that 3. Like, can you? I'll like. It's harder in a workshop, but I feel like when you're working with someone over time, it's like if they can try it on for a little bit and really either like take notes or something along the lines of, like, when something stressful has come up, where do you lean, and looking at also, same thing for the 9, like the hard thing for a 9 is, which I've experienced with 9s that struggle with typing themselves in general, is like 9s are in the gut triad, which totally fits a 9, but it's like you're not the 9s that I might reference today. It's like you're not on the move as much as like an 8 or a
Mm,
1, right? Like you're not. Now, yes, the one-to-one sexual 9s, yes, there's more of that like energy. But until they can identify that, I've seen a lot of 9 struggle. And honestly, if I've worked with someone and they're like, I feel like all the types, I'm like, you're probably a 9. Like,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yes,
Like, you're a
yes,
9.
yes, yeah. I
So, yeah, yeah, for sure. And when I have a 3 and 9 that are like struggling, it's helpful that I'm a 3, because I can usually really speak to, like, this would be a lot of your experience as a 3.
yes.
So, like, are you seeing that, or are you seeing something
Else.
else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's helpful. I wanted just to touch on that because you were here. And it's,
Yeah.
like I said, it doesn't happen often, but it does come up. And so I just wanted to hear your take on it. So this episode is not a typing session, but a coworker kind of compatibility.
Mhm.
And if you're new to this series, welcome. The whole intent behind this series is to talk about really no types are more compatible than others necessarily. It's really understanding yourself and the other person. And so that's the intention behind these. And so we're gonna get into a little bit of the strengths of these two pairings working together. So what what do you see either in the real world or what you're learning about the Enneagram as these, like what would be, how would these two complement each other? Like if they were put on a project together, what would be a great that they could work really well together?
So I think, like you're saying, I 100% agree. If two types are unhealthy or really toxic, like, it doesn't matter, what they're if they're in that space, it doesn't matter how compatible they could be. If they are unhealthy or toxic, like, then it's not going to work out. They're not going to be able to work on things together. I think the strengths in my experience between 9 and 3. I think there's almost like um, an understood positioning sometimes. Like I feel like like a type 3 is good at putting themselves in a position. And my experience with nines is they're good at like they're in a position, but it's not gonna be one that like pushes. So in my experience, nines and threes like together, it's like there can be cohesiveness, even though they're very different. Like there can be cohesiveness in that and a mutual respect if they're both
Mm.
healthy. And so I know for me, like I I have to really be mindful when I'm working with nines to slow down a little bit,
Mm.
because it matters to me, my relationship with this person I'm working with, right? So it's like if I want to have this connection with this person, then I need to value that they value if I would slow down a little bit
Mm.
and take some more time to just kind of like be in the energy. And that's a conscious effort for me to do as a type 3 to slow down. I think the other, like something that maybe makes these two types work well together is also, again, if they're both like healthy or they're both, not in that low level of health, um, once they are focused on the same thing, they're really quite effective. I think that nines can sometimes get a bad rep for this, but in my experience working with nines, if they are focused on the same thing, we can really like conquer something like a project or like a conflict together. So I think those are like a couple of the benefits that I've experienced.
Okay. Okay. Um, and I I I liked what you said about kind of the positioning, because I think what I see, and feel free to say something different or add to this, is the nines don't always, they can be wonderful leaders, but
Mhm.
they're also okay to kind of go with the flow. And a lot of times that three has more, like their leadership style is known as the pace setter for awareness to action. And so they kind of have this ability to set the pace, to kind of set the direction. And a nine, I think a lot of times is happy to go along with it for the most part. And so there's not like a what's the word? Like a fight, not a fight, but a you what I guess fight for
Like
like
a,
power or leadership
yeah,
position. It's like,
yeah.
okay, this is my role. This
A
is
power
the role.
struggle. I think
Power
you're looking
struggle.
for the
Yes,
power
thank you.
struggle.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was
you're
like,
welcome.
fight's
Yeah.
not the word, but it's okay. Yes, a power
Yeah,
struggle.
power struggle.
Yeah. And so that's where they fit together, like different, but fit together well, like a puzzle piece.
Hmm. Yes. And I think yeah, it's a good point you bring up. I agree. There's like there isn't too much of a power struggle, but there's also, even though threes are so like driven and forward moving, I know for myself, when I have a nine, like if I'm reporting to a type nine, um, I'm still driving, I'm still striving for excellence and those things, but it's also really important to me that things appear successful. And
Mm.
so if that means for me, because I would like to think I have some level of self-awareness after doing my own work on with the Enneagram. If it sometimes is more, oftentimes is like, when I look back on things, it's like, well, I didn't get into the power struggle, or like I was able to pause because it's just important to me that our relationship is successful and whatever our bigger, similar page is successful. And so I think that benefits nines sometimes in working with threes, because it's like, I want it to be successful. And if that means that sometimes I have to pause, I can do that. If that means sometimes I have to tolerate space or tolerate um, indecisiveness or tolerate whatever, like I will find my way in that. And if I can't find my way, just to be candid, I'll just fake it until it's there. So
Yeah.
it's like, otherwise, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That I thank you for adding that because that is that's such a good point and I mean absolutely I could see threes like nodding their heads too. It's like yeah, because again it goes back to that core motive. Maybe unlike a one, maybe this is like another clue. Not that ones want to get into a power struggle or appear unsuccessful, but I could see them maybe a little bit more focused on, well, we got to do it the right way versus you're
Mhm.
saying, fine, this isn't like my favorite way or maybe the best way, but for the sake of appearances, like united front, I'll go along with this.
E- Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing with three and ones, which I know is not what we're talking about, but this keeps coming up. I can get very I don't know if other threes feel like this. I get really irritated with ones sometimes, honestly, Sarah. Like I get like I can get irritated or intolerant around the like inability to pivot, because I think for threes it's
Mm,
like you got to pivot sometimes, right? And I think for some of the types, ones included, that's really hard sometimes in terms
yeah.
of like levels of discomfort and control and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
And I could see that potentially like adding to our strength list of the compatibility for the good between the three and the nine, because I think they're both pretty adaptable. Like, some of the strengths that I'll read or we'll talk about both of them, like they're pretty like able to move.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think the motivation is different for
Yes.
why they're adaptable. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Speaking of strengths, before we move on, I could see each other kind of inspiring different qualities. And I know that you had mentioned like as a three, like when there's you're working with a nine, you might slow down. Maybe other people kind of need that slow down pace. So the nine is there to be like that. I forget what word you said, like steady, level headed, like with
Stability.
yes,
Yeah.
stability. Um, and not that a three can't be that. It's just it's not maybe as much. What qualities do you see that a nine could pull from the three to enhance the relationship or to enhance their own career growth?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I would say that the nine, I would say if the nine could be encouraged by like a like how things for a three are visible. So like I think accomplishments for a three are usually visible, where for nines naturally like it could be an accomplishment but it's not like a maybe it's not visible, maybe not everybody knows about it because that's not what motivates them. But I think in the same sense it's good for nines to pull from some of that because nines are struggling inherently with like understanding like their presence and that they matter to people, right? And so I think if they can be encouraged by a type three, like really having more visible contributions, visible successes, visible yeah, I think that is a strength that a nine could maybe pull from. And then I just think like the movement forward piece and the follow through. So I never heard nines before I knew the Enneagram. People like other therapists that I work with and stuff knew the Enneagram before me and described nines. One therapist in particular, she was like, nines, they're kind of like they're really invested in something, and then all of a sudden they're like aloof. Like it doesn't even matter anymore. Like they've lost kind of the steam for it. And threes do not lose steam until the game is over. So I think that's another like
Okay.
strength that I could pull from a three. Does that make
Keep
sense?
it going. It does. I think the energy level is a difference. Or oh, I don't know if the energy level is the word, but kind of how you approach a project or just
Yeah.
the pace maybe. Because what I've also noticed, it's not maybe just a three, but it's, some of the other like more assertive types where, uh, it's like you tend to talk fast, you are moving fast, and, it could be hard for a nine to get a word in. Or they might feel like, oh, they're interrupting me. I was actually just taking a breath or a pause in my thoughts, which isn't bad. Like collect your thoughts. But I could just see that kind of being a point of friction when I guess we're maybe moving into that section, around the different paces that you can pull from each
Yeah.
other, but then it could also potentially be a point of frustration.
Yes. I've seen it. I've seen the frustration both ways. I've experienced the frustration both ways. As a three leader, like I have to be mindful of people that are on my team that are type nines. And I've had a few over the years, that not even the energy piece. It's my perception of how
Mm,
much they care about something or how much they're gonna take on something that I think they should take on. Um, like feeling This is so funny. I was talking about this the other day. It was like a type nine relationship, and it's like I need to know more that you're gonna get it done. Like as a three leader, it needs to be a little bit more, it's not obvious enough to me that I can rely on you to take care of this thing for whatever, the project, the customer, whatever. And that is my perception. It doesn't
okay.
mean it's true, right? Like it doesn't mean that's that person's reality. That is just my perception. And then I feel like for me, having been in relationships where a nine is over me, um, I can get very frustrated with not being given specific directions. Like
Mm,
there's so much beauty in for nines, like there's so much beauty in feeling like like I'm heard, like I have space, like I matter in the space, my opinion matters. Like there's so much beauty in that. And then on the other side of it, I still desire a clear path forward or like a priority of like, what do I do next? Like, um, and I can put it to you this way. This has been something that's been on my mind too. And I was trying to like find language for it. And really for me as a three, if I'm working for a nine, sometimes it's hard to anticipate what the nine needs. And I think this is at work and I think this is personally, like being able to anticipate what do you need? Because you're not going to necessarily say, "Hey, I need this," right? You may not be clear about it. You may like tiptoe around it, but then I am it's not landing on me that that was actually really important to you because you weren't super direct. So,
mm,
does that make sense, Sarah?
yes,
Have you
yes,
seen that like
yeah.
dance? It's like the craziest thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think people in this dynamic will like that will resonate on one side or the other. So it's this is a little bit of a leading question, I guess, but
Okay.
along the same line, these same lines, and then something
Mhm.
that you had said earlier about as a leader, as a type 3 leader, leading a 9, trusting that they'll get it done. What what are some things that they could do to help instill
Mm.
more trust?
I would say, okay, for me, and this sounds really like, really, that's it. I would say eye contact. I feel like sometimes nines avoid eye contact with me. And I don't know if that's and people, these are people that, like, I can remember a nine that I don't work with anymore, but it was like, it's okay to look in my eyes. Like, I'm not gonna like, something bad. But I think some of that is like insecurity and not wanting to, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, people have so many things going on in their mind. But I think for me, if I can make eye contact with a nine, then I feel more insecurity about like, okay, they got it. And then following up with me about like, not like you're, not like, I do not like micromanaging people, but you coming to me and just saying, hey, this is where I'm at with this, versus
Okay.
I again have to anticipate. I haven't heard anything. And if it were me, I'd be like, hey, I'm on this step and I'm going to do this
Yeah.
next and that kind of thing. So I think that communication
Okay.
back would be like very relieving for a three, even if the communication is, I haven't gotten to that or I'm stuck. I then would feel like I had some landscape of like what is going on.
Okay. Okay. I love that. And that might not feel natural for a 9 necessarily, but it could be really helpful. And again, I think just I'm just as a human being, like over communicating is usually like the better option anyway. But
Yes.
I have heard similar sentiments from threes, and not just about nines. Just saying that they appreciate that. Just again, they don't want to tell you what to do, but they just kind of want to know like, where are we moving forward? And then if not,
Right.
they're like problem solve because otherwise I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And then it's gonna fail. And I had no way of like figuring it out beforehand that I could have prevented that. So
Okay, now and I don't want nines to think we're beating up on them. So let me
yes.
swap the
Okay.
script a little bit. What are some of the strengths specifically that you see in a 9 as a leader? Because I think that a lot of the qualities of a 3, and I know that you know this, but listeners, as a 3, 8s, like ones, even like there's just some natural tendencies that we just like as a culture really value in leadership
In
skills.
leadership.
And for 9 specifically, they can be incredibly influential. I think it's a quieter influence, but they can be powerful in their own right. But we don't always, highlight those or talk about them. But they have some very important leadership skills. What do you see as some of the strengths that a 9 has specifically in the leader role?
Yeah, I love talking about this too because you're absolutely right. And this is like inherently like for nines, it's like we do need to talk about this because healthy nines have a natural ability to lead. Um, I think in my experience, the traits of a nine, when I mentioned that stability, I mean, like my experience with nines is we could be around a table and there be something going on. And if a type nine walks in the room, it is almost like everybody automatically is like at ease. And I
Mhm.
know that's my experience because I'm like, okay, this person is here now. And they are just naturally going to be able to like regulate all of this
Uh-huh.
in a sense with that stability, that calmness. Um, I think another strength for a nine that I've noticed, and that I really appreciate um, in leadership is that there is a predictability sometimes for nines, which I think some people are like, well, that's not a strength. It really is if you are on a team and your leader is a nine, is that peacemaker energy. There's predictability in how they're going to respond to something, for good or for better for worse. Like even if it's not something you agree with, it becomes a little bit like, okay, I know that they're going to do this. I think the other strength I see for nines is just the ability to like not get into drama or
Yeah.
like gossip, right? So I think like same with sixes. I think nines are good in a crisis in the sense of like they're not gonna get into all of sometimes like the outside noise that can happen in a crisis at work, right? Whether it's a customer issue, financial issue, like they're gonna make you believe it's okay either way, which is very comforting. I think, especially for someone like me, that I'm like always looking at, like, okay, what is the next thing that I have to like fix here? There, like, I get a lot of I lack optimism sometimes, and I think
Okay.
a nine leader can bring that, right? Like, it's not all doom and gloom. Like maybe that really terrible thing is not going to happen. And I don't think it's in a way of like denial. I think just nines that are leaders that have a lot of experience, and also they can just right size something very quickly in terms of like, this is not that big a deal. So I really appreciate that about nines. And I can remember specifically, um, I don't, is it okay that I talk about my relational nine that I have?
Yeah,
Even though
absolutely.
it's not a work
I didn't
relationship.
want to bring it up because it's not mine, but yes,
Right.
I think that would be
Okay.
interesting.
So I can remember a time where my husband, who's a nine, and if you ask my husband what type he is on the Enneagram, he will tell you he's a 10 because he doesn't know the Enneagram. He's not interested. It's like he does. It's not. It's fine, right? It's fine. That's he's a nine. It's
It's
fine.
fine.
It's fine. So I can remember my daughter is almost nine. She's going into third grade. When she was going into kindergarten, the summer before she went into kindergarten, she was just so the behavioral stuff like came out of nowhere. And I was like, wow, I really feel like this is not like her. And my response was, layer under layer of feeling like I'm failing her as a mom and I have
Oh,
failed to like discipline her properly. And, let's name all the ways that I have
yeah.
failed
You
in
failed.
this
Yes.
situation where my husband very much I mean because I think this was probably in the midst of me breaking down one night, like I don't know what I'm not doing for this little girl, and she's just being like disrespectful, and she's like, who is this person? And my husband goes, Dina, do you think she's a little anxious about going to elementary school? And I was like, what? What? He's like, she's like going to like big kids school and we've been like amping it up. And do you think maybe she's a little worried about
Okay.
that? And I thought, look at this man bringing up feelings, first of all, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like a therapist. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? That my kid is like emotionally struggling. No. Why
No.
didn't I think of that? Because I'm a type three is part of it. But also just like being able to put things kind of like organize things where they go for me so that the energy that I was putting into where have I failed? What did I do that I should be doing better? Right? Putting like kind of turning that around onto like, how can now I'm looking at her as a little girl who is worried or anxious. How can I support her? So
Mm.
he just in this very, because he can just see those sides that I don't see of things sometimes. And I think it's because of that ability to naturally kind of pause and like take a step back. And
Yeah.
so kudos to my husband, who I talk about a lot in my Enneagram world of like how our dynamic is. But that was a moment where I was like, wow, I cannot believe I missed that. And I
Yeah.
have to now like reflect on how I missed that and help my daughter, who was fine.
Maybe it's not about me. Yeah.
Right. Maybe it is not about me. Like, totally. So that
Oh,
when I think of like strengths of a nine who can lead, right? Because I think even in our personal relationships, like people lead. That was a moment where I was like, oh, okay, thank God for this person.
yes, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so good. Um, so many good things there. The other thing that I have heard people appreciate about the type nines is their ability to their ability and I think their genuine desire to hear people's voices and I think um, again, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the living example of this as a three. But sometimes I see or I'll hear about the efficiency of a three is kind of like let's make a decision, and it's not bad. It's just depending on the situation, but it's like let's
Mm-hmm.
make a decision and let's move forward. And we just cannot bring everybody into the room and ask everybody their thoughts and feelings about this, and we're
Mm,
moving forward. And of course you cannot. But occasionally maybe you can or you should. And I think a nines, from what I see, have a tendency to that's their first kind of decision making strategy. And people feel really valued and feel really heard. And I think that's where that how their ability to be influential comes into play because according to the awareness action framework, they're called the consensus builder. It's because they're able to build that consensus and people want to follow people who make them feel seen and heard.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I think yes, the forward like movement for a three can sometimes dismiss another, um, can dismiss the relational aspect of people feeling like they count, their opinion matters. And so my experience of nines as leaders is that like, let's bring everybody together, right?
Yeah.
Like let's do that, or which for me has been a growth area. Let's sleep on that and talk about it tomorrow with everyone.
Mm.
Like a whole day? Like a
Like,
whole day later?
I hadn't thought about that.
Right. And what do I like do with my hands between time?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's so I think that's part of the influence is like we don't need it's kind of like what I was sharing about like being in a crisis. Like we don't need there is that there's not a lot of urgency naturally in my experience with nines. And I think that a lot of situations call for a lack of urgency so that we can be level-headed
Yeah.
and come together and yeah, help everybody feel like they not necessarily, I think good leaders still make people or like influence people in a way that it's like it doesn't mean we're all decision makers in this room.
Right.
However, right, it still matters kind of the vibe of what everyone's experiencing in. And I think that nines as leaders, when they're really healthy, can they have less blind spots almost of what they could gain from hearing other people's perspectives. I don't know if I said that
Mm.
right, but like me as a three, I forget almost. Like it's a blind spot for me that someone else's perspective could put me in a different direction. And if I don't make the time to hear that, then I've missed out on A, the relationship, and B, maybe how I'm making that choice. So I think nines are influential in that too. That they don't have, that's not a natural blind spot. That's like a natural like come to me with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And I think it comes from a place of, well, if everybody feels heard, then we can all be at peace and nobody's going to be disgruntled, which is,
Hmm.
it's hard to avoid, but
Hmm.
that I think that's some of the thinking behind it. I want to talk about and as I will say this disclaimer with all of this is by no means like an all-inclusive, like all the strengths, all the
Oh.
dynamics of these. These are just some key highlights maybe that you can reflect on depending on who you are in this relationship. But I want to talk about kind of the movement between these two because this is also
Hmm.
a question like the line between the
Mm.
three and the nine.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the ways that we'll talk about it is like there's actually going back to the growth things that you can kind of take or borrow from another type is with the nine they have a tendency out of all the types to kind of neglect that striving to feel outstanding. That is known as like their growth arrow, but it's also known as their neglected strategy, according to awareness to action. And that makes sense because they will self deprecate a lot. They don't want to be in the spotlight. I hear from a lot of nines, I want to be appreciated and I want to be acknowledged, but like, don't put me on stage, don't call out my name. Like, there's not all the time, but there's a lot of oh gosh, I'm losing my words today, Dina, but there's like a lot of resistance
Resistance,
to having the attention
okay.
on you. And I think
Hmm.
that also comes with like not maybe wanting to speak first in a meeting or, make the call or make the decision because now the attention's on you. And
Yeah.
so that is something that they might resist or neglect, but it's also known as the growth arrow because there's so much growth that can happen as an individual contributor, as a leader, when you're willing to toot your own horn or toot your team's horn, and let people know. Any like examples or additional thoughts on that relationship with the three, the line to the three?
Yeah, the line to the three. Yeah, yes, I can see. I would say similar to like what you're saying. It's for the nine. I think it's and I do think the subtype slash instinctual drive can influence the like resistance level of that. But I do see it as like if the nine can grow in their three traits, like the what a great balance of like, yes, it's still important to me that everybody feels acknowledged or everybody feels valued. Um, and I can still honor my own influence on others in a way that portrays me as outstanding, successful, excellent, whatever, word you want to put in there. And I think that so I have seen a lot the combination at work of nines in the workplace connecting with more assertive types, maybe eights, maybe threes. And I think some of that for nines also gives them like some level of confidence or some level of like security around, okay, I can step into these shoes too and put myself more out there or be more directive, and it still be okay. And I think some of that is naturally what a nine could get on that half to three. I've also seen though nines if they're looking at the growth path of three, Um, I think there's some stress in that sometimes for them, like the resistance you're talking about. I think it can be stressful and it requires kind of a leap to just practice
Mm.
it. And I think it depends upon like, who that person, who that type nine has around them in the workplace, who they spend a lot of their time with, who they're on projects with. Um, because I think it's a leap for a lot of nines to feel like that's okay and that that's going to be accepted by other people around you. Like, because and my perception of accessing these paths, these arrows, it's like, yeah, someone might experience you a little bit different, but you're still who you are.
Yeah.
So it's not like all of a sudden you threw caution to the wind and as a nine, you don't care what anybody thinks. Like, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
That's not what it looks like, but I
Yeah.
don't know if they have a lot of confidence around that until it's practiced and there's like in there. Yeah, I just have a lot of like my nine experiences, they're so in their gut of like how they respond based on what their gut feels like. So it's like I think that's important that they feel okay
Mm.
in that three arrow and they're getting the vibe that like, okay, I'm still acceptable in terms of being a leader.
Yeah.
People still feel okay around me, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yes. Well, and two, threes very much care what others, I mean, I think we all do as humans a little bit, but threes also care about, their how they're perceived. So to your
Oh gosh,
point,
yes.
it's not at all like throw throw that to the wind.
No, no, no.
Would you talk a little bit about kind of the reverse, the line for the three to the nine?
Yeah, so the three line to nine is this I don't know what language, but stress, disintegration path. And the way that I see this at work or in relationships is just the type threes, like someone would, I guess, know that I've been able to do that, or like that part is more to the surface. Um, if a lot of it around my pace, if I'm slowed down, and it is, I mean, as that being a path for me that I will naturally access in stress. In stress, it looks a little bit like I've not thrown caution to the wind, but I'm more detached, which normally like I'm very in it.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like this for me, stress, I think is pretty obvious to people. And I experience it. Um, and the growth for me with my nine part has been being okay, being in my body more and being tapping more into like, what does my gut say about that? What is the vibe I'm getting? Like being more aware in that sense, where
Hmm.
normally I'm just like, just going. So I think the pause in that and then being able to balance as a three, like the whole notion of rest for a type
Yeah.
three, right? Which nines are also so good at without judgment. Where if I'm resting, there's still a level of judgment in that
Yeah.
for me. Um, and, you know, it is so when I can be okay with that nine part being more in my relationships to the surface for me, if it's at the end of like the higher, healthier traits of nine, that rest thing is so great because it's like it allows threes to really reframe productivity and that quite frankly, as a type three, like being able to have quality rest, whatever that looks like, right? It could be like literally sleeping. It could be not looking at my phone after a certain hour. It could be not booking my day full. that rest will essentially you like make me more tenacious, make me more adaptive, make me get more done without as much of an effort. Like it doesn't take much for my experience as a type 3 is like I don't need a whole lot of rest. Like, but when I can get myself there, it pays off in dividends. Like it's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I
Yeah.
think if it's wonderful for me, then as a leader, it's wonderful for the people on my team.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's such a good one. And sometimes for these episodes, I'll refer, I don't know if you've heard of this, Dina, or if our listeners have heard The Art of Typing by Ginger Lapid Bogda. And it goes through and matches up. It's kind of like, am I this or that? And I've
Mhm.
used it just to kind of look at some of the differences in compatibility. And
Yeah.
one of the three like main differences was the concept of relaxation and rest and the relationship that they each have. So that is real, and threes will probably be like, yeah, that tracks. Sounds about
Uh-huh.
right. Sounds about right. As we start to kind of wrap up, um, I'm curious if you, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, so if you don't,
Okay.
that's okay. But I'm curious if you have one kind of practical tip for each of the types to better understand each other or better work with one another. And I know we've already kind of covered one with the type nine, just kind of staying in communication with the three. So that can be our practical tip, or we can add one. Um,
Okay.
but is there any advice that like it could be a small thing, a big thing that you would offer to the type three teammate or leader to work better with their type nine teammate?
Yeah, I would say really being grounded. And I do a lot of grounding work with sixes, but I do also think that grounding for a three, like to me, is more about grounding in the reality of um, weighing out efficiency, productivity versus the relationship. So getting grounded in, because again, I think even though we're like heart dominant and maybe feelings focused for threes, I think there's often this like thing of I'm going to use somebody else's language that I was talking to the other night, things over people as a type 3. And it's like, so as a type 3, grounding in like the relational aspect versus the success of the thing, the success of the project, the success of the customer's experience, the success of XYZ. Like, I think as a leader, it's really important to be able to acknowledge that leaders aren't going to get anything done if they don't have a team. And
Mm.
so being able to place value on the relational aspect of your relationship with someone on your team for a three is not automatic. So I think grounding yourself as a three in that. And then I think also as a three, just like, and when I say grounding, it's the same way of like find something that will make you pause. So I don't know what that is for people, right? For me, it's like I have to have time on my calendar to just like read something, journal at my desk. Like I have to have that. I have to check out for a moment to be able to keep things in perspective, which I think is again another strength of a nine. Like that checkout thing is a strength for nines, right? So it's like when I can do that as a three, everybody benefits because I've stopped the hamster long enough to be able to like put in perspective. Okay, don't bulldoze over this teammate or this direct report. Like look at relationally, where are they coming from? And like you were talking about when I was talking about my daughter, like maybe it's not me. Like maybe
Yeah.
I need to look at them, what's going on with them and how I can support. So I don't know if
Yes.
that's like practical enough,
No,
but that's what
that's
I
so
thought
good.
of.
Just I think those are like good reminders, good just kind of like pause and reflect. Anything that you would add to the practical tip that we talked about for a nine, working with their three leader or teammate that they can do to better communication, just the relationship in general.
Yes, I would say the communication thing. I would also say, like, be mindful for nines of their own maybe anger or stress coming to the surface. I know in nines, in my personal life, in my work relationships, the influence is more than just like everybody feels heard. The influence is also like if a nines are not really ever dysregulated. So if they are, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, high alert. Like something is really wrong now because this nine is having like a sense of urgency around this. So it's like, I think if that's accurate, great. Like if the building is on fire, like get going, right?
Yes.
But I think like for nines in that like sure, like if something is going on, people are looking at nines to see kind of the energy of the space, the energy of that room, the energy in the relationship. So I think for nines, like it's difficult because the vibe that a nine puts off does have that same influence on others as all of the strengths that we shared. So just being mindful of like their own anger and where that goes and how that influences other people and how they're witnessing that. Especially in a leadership position. And I know, like working with nines, and nines I've had as leaders, it's like, yeah, I very much will gauge the severity of something. If that nine leader is having a like big reaction, I'm like, oh my gosh. We have, I don't know, crashed in the ocean.
Oh,
Like,
oh my
so
gosh.
I think just being mindful of that for nines too, like you have an influence, so like you gotta regulate some of that.
Great, 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 great point. I've really enjoyed this. It's nice to hear. I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of other Enneagram teachers, facilitators out there, and so it's always nice to get just somebody else's take on things. And then one of the things that I just so appreciate about Dina that I should have mentioned in the beginning. I mean, she is a clinical director as like her day job. She uses the Enneagram in the real world, like on a daily basis with her own
Mhm.
team, in addition to being a licensed therapist and then a certified Enneagram coach. So just so much wisdom and real world experience. So thank you for sharing that. And speaking of threes and burnout, I know that you also in your own private Enneagram practice and maybe therapy, correct me if I'm wrong. You work specifically with women who are trying to navigate burnout. Would you just say a little bit about that and where people can learn more about potentially getting supported by you?
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, in my private practice, I have, as a licensed therapist, I have a private practice where I am working with women who are high achieving, usually women who are experiencing the struggle of balancing like work, integrating home life, being a spouse, a parent, those kinds of challenges that a lot of women are facing. And I really enjoy working with women that are in transitional spaces in their life. So maybe in career transitions, right? Getting promoted, looking for the next thing, what that dynamic is like within an organization. but also life transitions, empty nesting, or having babies, like all those transitions that women go through while still trying to like have a career and work. So I really enjoy working with women that want some help around that burnout, the anxiety that comes with that. Sometimes emotional disconnection comes with that in their relationships. And you can find me on my website. So my website is enneagramtherapywithdina.com. And there's a way to reach me on there. The other place I am is on LinkedIn, Dina Smith, LMHC. And yeah, I'd love to answer questions if people have them. They can shoot me a message. And if women are looking for a space where they can also integrate their faith, I'm open for that as well.
So I'm so glad you shared all of that. I also know that there are a lot of corporations, potential listeners that have specific women's groups. I just was able to share the Enneagram with a women's group today, and this would
Oh,
be such a wonderful kind of combination. So definitely reach out to Dina, let her know what you're taking away from this episode on Instagram. Check out our website, which will connect in the show. And with that, Dina, thank you for being here. I appreciate
yes.
all that you shared. And listeners, thank you for being here. And we'll see you in the next one.
Hi.